everyone, this is Liz Easton, and I wanted to take a quick second to invite you to listen in to the PC Book Club. Wait, I need to start again. Hi, everyone. This is Liz Easton, and I wanted to take a quick second to invite you to listen to the PC Book Club, aka PCBC. Every so often, Ricardo Avila and I chat about the books that you should be reading right now. It's just like sitting on your own private book club discussion, only there's probably slightly more references to true crime and Charles Dickens. I did not write this.
We may have to re-record that anyway, because I think you just said it's just like sitting on your own private book club.
She did. That was great. Sitting on a book club. Sitting on a private book club. That's pretty racy. Sorry.
Should I try again? It's just like sitting in on your own private book club discussion, only there's probably slightly more references to true crime and Charles Dickens. So if you're looking for the class with an occasional dose of the sass, then check out the PC Book Club right here on the Popping Collars feed. Class and sass.
Love it.
I was praying to the Lord for some fun, but I guess you didn't have some.
Hi, I'm Greg Knight.
Hey, I'm Ryan Parker.
And this is PCTV, a Popping Collars side project where we randomly select a current TV show that you should be streaming right now. Ryan and I have each picked 6 shows apiece from the top streaming apps. And this month, we are talking about the Max series, The Sympathizer.
Biracial, bilingual. It was a synthesis of incompatibilities. So what did I do?
Welcome to the world of spycraft.
Get down!
Saigon, 1975. I was a man of 2 faces.
You are the only one I can trust.
The war was ending.
Yo!
And I awaited my new assignment.
My protege.
Jesus.
So where are we going?
To the next harbor on your CIA voyage. America. By the time I'm through with you, you'll be able to blend in with the Harvard rowing crew. Let's get down. Let's get funky.
Get down!
You play your part without a flaw. What are you concealing?
Tao chẳng nhận được tin tức gì từ mày. Old friend. We sent you to America so you could be our mole. Remember our mission.
Cậu không bao giờ quên nhiệm vụ của tôi. Đồng chí.
This communist sleeper agent right under our nose. Believe it or not, your name came up once. Nhớ là ai? Phải bị thủ tiêu.
The success of any classified operation rests largely on how classified it manages to remain. Don't you agree?
How did you become this?
Wisdom!
I don't know if I can go on like this.
Mày sẽ tìm được cách. Mày luôn làm được.
Ryan, I have the log line for The Sympathizer. Would you like to hear it?
Yes. I had to think about it.
Yeah.
Yes, I want to hear it. I want to hear it.
This is helpful for me because I was constantly questioning, like, when is this happening? Like, what is the time frame of this? So this is helpful. Near the end of the Vietnam War, a plant who was embedded in the South Vietnam Army, flees to the United States and takes up residence in a refugee community where he continues to secretly spy and report back to the Viet Cong. That's part of the show. Let's see. How else would we flesh this out?
An inquisition into truth.
Right, exactly. It's he is a
Authority,
He is a spy with a conflicted conscience.
colonialism.
And loyalty to his friends who are on either side of the conflict. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot there. Thematically.
And is being manipulated by about 5 different Robert Downey Jr.'s at the same time.
Yeah. And I think manipulated by both his own government and through Robert Downey Jr.'s characters, the American government.
Right.
Like he is clearly a torn individual, but we can come back to that.
We should also say, as we're having this conversation, the main character of this show does not have a name from the show. He's just referred to as the captain. So
Yeah.
if we refer to the character as just he, him, lots of male pronouns, it's because he does not have a name. So,
Or maybe we just stick with "Oh, Captain, my Captain."
That's right. That's right. As a matter of fact, not many of the characters in this show have names. They're mostly referred to by their title. Ryan, why did you pick The Sympathizer as our Max show to talk about?
Because I had already watched it and I wouldn't need to cram another show. I'm kidding. That is certainly part of it, but because it's very well done, it's more of the moment than some of the other shows we've discussed, and that's not a bad thing or makes it better or worse than anything else we've discussed, but it's relatively new, so I think there's a lot of people who have watched it, and it's quite good. I was intrigued because most people may know this name, but it was co-created and co-show ran by one of my favorite filmmakers of all time, which is Park Chan-wook, the South Korean film director, screenwriter and producer and writer, and has created some of the most iconic thrillers of all time, some of the most disturbing
Some of the more
cinematic
twisted,
sequences you have ever seen.
Yeah.
So to see him step into longer form content was so exciting, and there's a great profile in him in the New Yorker written by Gia Tolentino that people should check out. So I was really intrigued to see what he would do given more time. And I think for me, and then also just my wife and I spent some time in Vietnam, and just always interested in that history and how it's told and who tells it. That's certainly at play here in this series. We can talk more about that if you want to. And one of the reasons that having seen it, the way in which it plays with time, the way in which it plays with narrative, and then visually, I think the episodes that Park Chan-wook directs, the first 3, are far superior to anything else in the series. But they're also very good. I just think he brings a flair to his work that I didn't see in the other episodes, but that could also be my bias. So
yeah, I was going to say
those are some ideas.
Yeah, I was going to say maybe the 4th episode, the movie shoot, which I don't think
Tropic Thunder.
Yeah.
What the cut? Laughably horrible. Cut. Are you trying to ruin my movie? So now we got real Vietnamese extras, but it looks like they've never seen war. You're not Charlie, you're Charlie Brown. I'm not scared. I should be terrified. Tell them.
Well, maybe they need a line to yell at the farmers.
Oh, which amongst them? They all look like children. He's okay. You're hired. Get him up front, give him a line.
Right.
Get him riled up.
Okay.
Let's go.
Which I don't think he directed, but
no.
But that certainly has some visual flair, especially at the end. No, yeah, it's so funny that you're talking about this idea of who tells the story of Vietnam, because even in our lifetimes, right, it's sort of fallen into almost mythology, the Vietnam conflict. So full disclosure, I'm a child of the 80s, a teenager of the 90s. So Vietnam was always this mythic conflict that existed in the past. It was sort of America's sort of shameful war from the 20th century. It's the war we lost kind of thing. And so all of the pop culture that surrounded it was all about kind of American loss of innocence. So, by the time we did start making movies about Vietnam, it was things like Apocalypse Now and The Deer Hunter and things that really sort of challenged, like, how is this conflict like scarred the American soul? But all of that is putting America as the central character, right? And failing to recognize the humanity of the Vietnamese, which this show attempts to correct, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, it struck me when we were preparing for our trip to Vietnam, which was part of a larger travel experience. We stayed for about a month, and we thought we read as many different histories as we could and novels that were set there. And it was one of the first places that we were going to go that we hadn't visited before. To read it written about and to hear it talked about as the American War that's a perspective shift, right? To think, oh, not everybody talks about things the same way that we did, and who's telling the story, and then also like telling people we were going, and people saying, why on earth would you go to Vietnam?
Oh yeah, that's a good
and
point.
Then the place that I want to go back to the most is Vietnam. Like, we had such an amazing experience, and but also to talk about just American military involvement in that region at that time. I mean, there's a reason why Anthony Bourdain hated Henry Kissinger,
right?
Like, and wished profound ill on him, right? Because the marks of our military presence there are still felt, and you can see it today, and it's quite disturbing, and so it adds perspective. So yeah, I think all those things that you're talking about as also a child of the 80s, teenager in the 90s, that really resonates.
Yeah. I mean, I would say like my first image that comes into my head whenever anyone says the Vietnam War is the poster for Platoon, right? That's kind of what we grew up with, was that idea of the soldier in the bush kind of thing.
Yeah.
What are some initial takes that you have on the show, The Sympathizer? What are some things that stood out to you right away?
Well, I'm not going to steal your thunder because I'm looking at your notes, so I'm going to let that. But hot takes on the show. I mean, I think it's a bit of what we've talked about already, and the daring approach to keep some of, based on what I've heard about the book. I haven't read the book,
right?
But to keep intact the fact that your protagonist is a communist spy.
Yeah.
The captain is the protagonist of the series, but it's very complicated, and he's very complicated. Guess what? Like life is. I like the fact that there didn't seem to be a watering down of that complexity. And the fact that there's this, there's significant characters for whom that fight seems rather noble for them, right? Like that their motivation is to kind of create their own place, their own identity. So that the way it plays with time, I really loved back and forth. Where are we? Who are we?
Right.
So those kind of aesthetic, stylistic elements, and then of course those also carry with them thematic, and we may say even theological or ethical considerations that we can talk about later. But and then again, just the fact that for me, I hope that Park Chan-wook does more TV and longer, like he directs more episodes. So
he did like the first three, right? Yeah, I think he did the first three.
He did, yeah.
So I would just to piggyback off of your thought, like that's such a great point. With the captain being the central character in this drama, it's natural for us as an audience for our loyalties to sort of lie with him, because he doesn't really do anything bad necessarily. I mean, well, he does kill a couple of people, but all that is to say that, like, I think the real sort of gift of the show is that it plays with this idea of not only time and trust and truth and all of that stuff, but also this idea of loyalty. And who are we, the audience, loyal to? Are we loyal to the character that we're following through this whole drama, even though he's a spy for the Communist Party, or are we and therefore sort of historically marked as an enemy, or are we sort of secretly rooting against him in the way that you kind of secretly root against Tony Soprano, right? In The Sopranos. It's a fascinating sort of take on audience loyalty, I would say. But no, mine is Park Chan-wook, who you mentioned before. So let me just do a quick rundown, which is to say that everyone, we're saying his name, but everyone would know probably Old Boy as like his most successful movie. It's fascinating to think of Old Boy as like a 20-year-old movie now, because it feels like it just came out not too long ago.
I remember the first time I watched that film, I was not right. It messed me up.
It
messed me up.
Yeah. So if you've ever seen Old Boy, then you know. If you haven't seen Old Boy, watch it, but realize that
we didn't tell you to watch it. You're an adult.
There is a twist at the end that is just really messed up. And that's kind of the creator that we're talking about a little bit here, which is like Park Chan-wook. He does this great job of playing with or creating situations that seem just so horrific or so repugnant that they border on absurd and comic as a result. So there were times as I'm watching The Sympathizer that I was asking myself out loud, like, is this a comedy, or is this a drama, or is this a thriller? Like, what is it? And the answer is yes. It's all of that. It's like, it's so crazy that it's a little funny, but also very disturbing.
I don't know how to say this without going into the grotesque, because that's also an element of his, which is it's kind of like the opposite of the sublime, right? In terms of aesthetics and theater. And I'm just looking at his filmography here on the phone as we talk about this, but then thinking about how that pops up in The Sympathizer, and all I can say is the scene with the squid.
Right.
But that says so much about that character.
Yeah.
And what he's willing to do for
loyalty. Yeah.
Exactly. What he's willing to do for fill in the blank, and what he's willing to do for his mother, what he's willing to do, and it makes a point. Could you have made the point in another way? Sure. But he would say, I think in that interview, in that profile with Gia Tolentino, he's like, well, why would I make it in another way? That's boring.
Right.
So
my God.
He even acknowledges his shock value, right?
Yeah.
That I'm going to get you to pay attention. But I guess the question is also, do people take away what he hopes people take away, or are they simply disgusted by, or will never forget the image of a man cutting out his own tongue?
Yeah.
I'm switching titles here, but does that make sense? That
makes total sense. When you said that comment about, well, that's boring, that sounds so like Quentin Tarantino, right? Where people are constantly on him about the violence in his movies or the language in his movies or something like that. And he'll always come back with, well, then why make a movie, right? If you're not trying to provoke people with art, then why even make it?
That's also very Hitchcockian, if you will. And I forget, I would have to go back to my film history notes, but film is life with the boring bits cut out.
Yeah.
So there's a history of that, and it is one that is increasingly ramped up in terms of the grotesque or the absurd or what have you. But there have been filmmakers who have always said, that it is to be entertaining and shocking, but then there are others who, like a Bresson or a Dreyer or somebody, who are like, no, the boring bits are life. That's what we're going to make our films about. And it's both and for film lovers, you can hopefully find an experience in both, or through both.
Yeah. Or even what's the tension that lives in the margin? So somebody like Tarkovsky, for instance, who makes boring cinema in the way that Bresson does and stuff, but has like tremendous tension kind of sitting in between like the scenes and the line and stuff. That is one thing that I'll say about Park Chan-wook, just really briefly before we get to our best scene stuff, which is that a lot of his stuff is what do you bury, and which is to say, what do you repress in your memory? A lot of his stuff is dealing with repression, memory, burying sort of bad memories, guilt, shame. Like that's a lot of his stuff. And it's funny because I was just thinking about Decision to Leave. What was that, last year that it came out, or the year before?
Which was that, by the way. I need to remedy that this week.
Yeah, that was like his murder mystery. It was really good. It's like a detective drama, but again, it deals with this idea of repression, suppression of thoughts and stuff like that. And that's what this show is. It's not only about the captain's loyalty and what he's willing to do for his loyalty, but it's also the things that he chooses to forget is key to understanding how the story is told as well. And usually the stuff that he chooses to forget is really horrific stuff. So yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Best scene, sequence, episode, or storyline from the Sympathizer.
You go first on this one.
Okay. I'm going to take the sequence from the end of the first episode, which is the sprint to the plane during the fall of Saigon. So they do a depiction of basically the fall of Saigon, and anyone who watched that's certainly something that's stuck in American minds of people fleeing the embassy and stuff like that when the conflict was starting in Vietnam. And we saw echoes of that recently with Afghanistan and people making, comps and references to the fall of Saigon. But it's just this really harrowing sort of sequence that involves our main characters trying desperately to get onto a plane with bombs falling all around them. And, you have there's this real tension of, are they going to make it or are they not? And is the worst possible thing going to happen? And the way that it ends, that first episode, is that it ends on a cliffhanger. And it's one of the most gut-wrenching cliffhangers you could ever have, right? It's this incredible use of tension, violence, shocking imagery, all of it just kind of bound up in like one 5-minute sequence.
Yeah, it feels like it conveys the horror of that war very succinctly. Like, and really, all war in any situation where people are forced to flee. I mean, that's kind of the epitome of having to flee your home. And yeah, I like that scene a lot too. And just reading a bit, I keep going back to this profile, but the interview about the shooting that sequence of, like, think about how powerful that is. What you just talked about, you feel like you're running alongside this plane or behind the plane alongside these people, and bombs are going off and all this. And then imagine just rehearsing that, right? And backing up that plane, that prop back of a plane, however they were pulling that. And yeah, so that was brutal. Yeah. My favorite scene is probably the lowest hanging fruit, and you're probably going to roll your eyes when I say this, but the dinner table scene in episode 3 with all of the Robert Downey Jr.'s at the same table.
Oh, sir? Yeah. Turns out the professor inspired our friend's next project. Actually, he read an article of mine in the New Republic. It was about the first forays of the Green Berets into the Highlands, and he's latched onto it. They say imitation is the highest form of flattery. I wouldn't mind a bit of compensation. And he comes on strong, making all kinds of demands about hardware that I can provide you because of my relationship with the National Guard, trucks, tanks.
Who does he mean by he?
Thank God I'm here. How's everyone doing?
Right this way.
Fashionably late, huh? Thanks. All's good, I trust. Our sacred allied force. So you're my Vietnamese guy.
Excuse me? Who are you?
Really? First words out of his mouth?
You don't know who he is?
Nikos Demianos. You never heard of the combination? And the combination 2.
Oh, sure.
You don't know. He knows the movies, just not your face, right? Yeah. Okay, but for starters, have you seen the movies?
The first? About a quarter?
So you got bored, you walked out. What, you thought it was garbage? What are you, a critic?
Air raid warning. Evacuated the cinema. I liked what I saw, though, so don't tell me the ending.
Look at him guzzling. Hammer's getting hammered over here. Take it easy, buddy. Despite my best judgment, I like this kid. He's plucky. Are you plucky, kid? Oh, he is wildly plucky. How deep does it go?
The pluckiness?
No, your blood. How deep? Because what I'm looking for is 100%. You know, and you look, pardon my French, a tad diluted.
Just in terms of shooting that, and designing that, and the special effects that the visual effects that went into play there, this kind of multifaceted American villain. Is villain the right word?
He's a villain. I think, we probably need to unpack that based on the reveal that happens at the end of the last episode.
Let's do that. But I will also say, as like a runner up for my sequence, I would say sequences. Anytime we go back to the captain's childhood and his relationships with his two friends, who are also at different points and as adults on different sides of this conflict, and how the flashbacks happen when he thinks about his friendships, how in some ways is it Bond, who is kind of betraying him potentially. Anyway, so his childhood friendships there, and then their relationships evolve throughout their history. I really enjoyed those, but I mean, the quick and easy one was like, the dinner scene. So how would you unpack that? Like, what do you think about that? Robert Downey Jr.
The Robert Downey Jr. So it was always odd, right? So it should be said, like, we've been talking kind of about this, but Robert Downey Jr. plays 4 characters.
I think it's 5.
It's the CIA agent, the writer, the professor, the congressman, the director, and then at the end he has a role that is kind of he plays a priest, right? That shows up at the end. Yeah. So all of this is to say that, I mean, gosh, this is hard. I think there's no way to talk about it except to say that this is just spoilers. So
spoiler alert.
If you haven't watched The Sympathizer, I'm just going to spoil something at the end here, which is that one of the memories that the captain represses is the fact that his mother is being assaulted regularly by the village priest, who looks like Robert Downey Jr. and the village priest, Robert Downey Jr., is likely the captain's father, as a result of these sexual assaults.
Yep.
And so therefore it seems right in my mind to think that every other major white person that comes into his life doesn't necessarily, and they're not all Robert Downey Jr., but in his mind and with his suppressed memories, they all look like this devil character that, assaulted his mother as a child. So he just transfers the worst evil face that he can think of onto the faces of all of these evil white men that are trying to manipulate him, right?
Yeah.
That's how I would unpack that.
Hadn't quite thought about that. Thanks for the assist.
Well, I don't know that that's right. It just so happens, though, that like the only white characters that are on the show are all played by Robert Downey Jr., except for David Duchovny playing another actor, right? So but Robert Downey Jr. plays the director, and every single one of these men are in some way manipulating the captain along the way. Either politically or professionally, or as a CIA agent, or as a writer, as this professor who's written this horrible book in the minds of the captain. Right? They're all violating him, his life, his country in some way.
Casting Robert Downey Jr. across these different characters was a matter of necessity as much as it was creativity, if you will. But I think that quickly came about if you listen to some of the conversations about like aesthetically or thematically what that does. And I think you certainly hit the nail on the head that like it allows you to do that, right? Like have this idea of him projecting this person onto these other individuals.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of
that's quite interesting. Yeah.
Well, at the end of the day, the way that the story is being told is from the captain's perspective. We're basically watching a reenactment of a statement that he's writing down, like a confession that he's writing,
and being forced to write over and over.
Yeah.
Until he gets to some sort of truth that appeases his captors. You know.
So that gets us to best performance. Come for, stay for.
Yeah, look, I mean, I don't know. I think for me, I keep going back to Chan-wook. That's, kind of what I came for. And of course, Robert Downey Jr. is Robert Downey Jr. But stay for, and I'm so sorry if I butcher this name, but Tuan Lee or Lei.
That's how I would pronounce it. Tuan Lee.
As the general.
Uh-huh.
We haven't even talked about him, who is trying to mount this, army to go win back Vietnam, right? And, he's the former leader of the South Vietnamese secret police. He's growing this business in LA and kind of like import export. He's got a liquor store, but I don't know. I just found him to be such a compelling figure. What did you think about that character?
I thought he was great. Again.
Yeah. Great actor.
Yeah. So my come for was maybe Robert Downey Jr. just because that's you just see 4 Robert Downey Jr.'s and you're like, oh, what is this? And then I agree with you. Stay for Tuan Lee because again, the general is a perfect example of what is this? Is this absurd? Is this like a comic relief character? Is this is this a real is he a real threat?
Can I say one thing, and like at the risk of being dismissive, and I don't mean it this way at all, but the scene where the captain crosses the ridge in the desert to find the general's men training felt to me like any sort of KKK scene in a Coen Brothers movie. Like it felt like there was an element of humor to it, not that these guys are like KKK, but like they're like, am I supposed to be laughing at these guys out in the middle of a desert in LA training to get on a boat or a plane to go take over Vietnam? Like it just, to your point, it's kind of funny. It's comedic.
It's like 40 people. It's like 40.
What are you going to do? Yeah. What are you going to do? Half of them are overweight, you know, like, yeah.
I know that's the thing. It's like but it's also really terrifying when that happens. When the captain comes up over the hill and he sees this militia, and he's like what the hell is going on?
Like is probably happening somewhere in Montana right now.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure there's like if you rolled up on one of these Blackwater guys like out with his buds in Montana, like doing what deep survival, whatever, like hoarding survival stuff. I mean, it's just wild, but it's also like you also have tremendous sympathy for this character. He's constantly being bullied by the Robert Downey Jr. CIA character. He has graffiti sprayed on his business about atrocities committed by the Vietnamese. His daughter has embraced Hollywood life and American life and has basically turned her back on her Vietnamese identity. I mean, there are all kinds of things that feel like a conflict for this guy, and yet at the same time, he just comes off as such a clown that you're just like it's almost like it's this sad but dangerous person.
Who says I hate you?
Then what? You envy me?
I don't know, Sonny. Perhaps it's because you seem unburdened. Because you simply picked a side, and then you lived with the consequences. I have something to confess to you.
So you do love her. Just get it out.
No, I already told you I'm not here for Sophia. I asked you before if you were a communist. And you said you wouldn't tell me if you were. But what if I told you that I was a communist?
What's the point of playing such a game?
It's not a game. I am a communist. I've been an agent for years. For the revolution. I infiltrated the secret police and sent intelligence back to Hanoi. Even now, I report on reactionary activities and do everything I can to undermine them. In fact, me handing you these documents now is part and parcel of my anti-revolutionary strategy.
You want me to say I'm a communist too?
I'm being honest for once.
Did the general put you up to this? You were setting me up to report on some concocted CIA conspiracy so you can discredit me and my criticism? That's what you secret police do, isn't it? How stupid do you think I am? What, did you think you'd suddenly be attracted to Sophia again if you said you were a communist?
I told you I'm sick and tired of talking about Sophia.
When? You said that about politics.
You know, for a long time, I've worn a mask. I just needed a chance to safely take it off. At least once. Even if it's just for a moment. And since I've taken that one off, here's another one. I killed him. Major One.
Wait, that toy?
Let's turn it over to Theology Corner, which I actually don't have a ton. I imagine that you may have more than I do.
No, well, I don't know about all that. Other than just the ideas, I don't want to like belabor the point, but this idea of who gets to tell a story, what are the motivations for the stories that we tell about our own experiences or past experiences? As you pointed out at the top of the show, reading about the Vietnam War is different than reading about the American War. So theologically, I see in the notes where you're going to go, and I had forgotten about this key element to the film, which I think is really compelling, or the series, that I'm interested to see where you take this. And then I think we also see this throughout history, and we're seeing it now a little bit. When you hold up an ideal over the humanity of other people, you'll do anything. Yeah. You can do anything to support that ideal.
Yeah.
And if you fail to see your fellow human, or as I like to say, earthling, as a human being, and not first and foremost as whatever party they're aligned with or where they're from, if you don't do that, then you can do anything. And I think we see that in the series, especially in some fairly disturbing ways. And I know that sounds utopian and Pollyannish, but I don't see any other way to be in the world if we're going to coexist here. So, yeah, what's kind of a takeaway for you in terms of?
I mean, honestly, it's what, so the only note that I wrote down was this idea of what's the goal? Like, where are we going? What are we trying to get to? Right. In a lot of ways, it's a bit of a Wizard of Oz story. It's like, what's at the end of the yellow brick road for the captain? Like, what is he working towards and what is he going to get? And ultimately, what he realizes is that he's going to get stranded in America. Like, he's not going to be able to live in this utopian communist Vietnam that he's working harder than just about anybody to make happen.
That's right.
And so he surreptitiously, moves himself back to Vietnam with this militia that the general has created. He gets in with them, and then when they get captured, he thinks that he's going to get welcomed back into the fold, but he gets treated like any other prisoner. The last episode is where this all comes together, where they have basically a re-education camp where Vietnamese who are holding out against the Viet Cong are being taught how to be communists. And here you have a spy for the Communist Party who's being re-educated on how to be a communist, which is just fascinating, because it's like, what's the thought there? That he's he's been in America for so long that he's been corrupted by American ideals and stuff. I mean, we've seen in his telling of the story that that's not true. And yet I think that the key is there comes this line in the last episode where he's being told that he has 3 chances to figure out what is greater than independence and freedom in this sort of new communist Vietnam. And the ultimate answer is nothing. Nothing. The actual nothing. Nihilism, right, is more important, is greater than independence and freedom. Like the idea that nothingness, the lack of anything, is better than utopian Vietnamese society. It's just a chilling thought. It is a total stripping away of humanity, individualism. It's wild. It's just wild.
But see, that's the other question though, is why are they imprisoning him? Then why they imprison anyone? Like, what is this idea? Like, what are they trying to get to? What are they trying to be re-educated to? Or what are they trying to re-educate people towards if no thing is the goal?
Yeah.
Like, what does anything matter if no thing is the goal? And no thing may be the wrong way to pronounce that. But I mean, I think you think about nothing, or there is no thing, but nothing, nothingness. But that's also a central theological. Why is there something and not nothing?
Listen, it's like you have 2 different sort of philosophical arguments coming at each other here, right? From the Gospel of John, you have the question from Pontius Pilate of what is truth? And that's a little bit of what's happening here. It's this idea of the captain saying, what is truth? Right. Yeah. And then you have, I don't know, Nietzschean philosophy that's basically like, there's nothing. There's nothing there. You keep saying things like you know what truth is or you know what God is, and there's nothing. There's an abyss. There's absolutely nothing on the other side of this. And it's like, I feel like those 2 things are coming into conflict with each other because the captain wants to know that his life has meaning and that his work has meaning, I think. And at the end of the day, he is a cog in a global conflict that really doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I don't know.
And what about the idea of like, if there's nothing and it's just a great abyss, or what if that abyss is something that we are in and it's so enormous and unknowable that there's nothing that you can say like that would possibly give perspective to that or like help you understand that. And so all it requires is a profound humility to say, I do know nothing. I don't know anything relative to the enormity of this something.
Did I mention that there are moments where the show feels like a comedy? Like you would never know it because we've gone totally into philosophy corner at this point.
Yeah.
But it's a really funny show in moments too. So,
yeah.
It's crazy.
It's really compelling. I mean, it's a show that my wife and I watched together and we're equally engaged, and that just doesn't often happen. I mean, for a show that we'd probably want to talk about on a podcast like this,
just to wrap things up in Theology Corner, the comment that the only scripture that I could think of that would make sense of this whole thing is, what would it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his soul?
Yeah,
that's kind of what we're talking about here.
I'm with you. Yeah,
the captain has achieved his dream, and what does he have at the end? Nothing. He's got Vaughn, and he's on a boat, and everyone around him is singing a dead anthem to a country that no longer exists, and he can't take part in it.
Rồi về thành phố, người phu quét đường dừng trôi lưng nghe. Này bác qua đây, anh thưa nghe dạy. Này bác qua đây, con thơ buồn vui. Lên sân trói và trôi trên núi. Đại bác đêm rồi về thành phố, người phu quét đường dừng trôi.
Yep.
It's like, okay.
God, it's so depressing.
The end.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
it's just wild.
On that note.
Yeah. And oh, by the way, it's really funny. Okay. Let's talk about Max for a little bit. I feel like when we started this podcast, it was still HBO Max. And now it's become Max. And now it's kind of like it was this question of what is it? Is it the Discovery Channel with HBO shows and stuff? I feel like Max is starting to make sense to me what it is. It's like a cable platform where you can pick what you want to watch and everything kind of branches off from this one sort of center. Is that what it is?
I guess so. I mean, hopefully it's just a site where I know that the series that are going to be on there, while they may not be my taste in terms of genre, for example, are going to be high quality.
Yeah.
So like, I'm in the midst of the second season of House of Dragons, which I was mildly intrigued and on board with for the first season, but I'm loving this season.
Okay.
There's looking at their big teaser reel for what's coming up. There's a lot of really cool stuff coming down the pipe. And so I think, hopefully it's just like, I don't know how big the Sympathizer was for them or is. It's not House of Dragons. But I think it's good enough for people to say, oh, yeah, I'll stick around for this show or what's coming next. So, yeah, to me, when I think about it, if that's what we're saying, it's like part of their identity of like, I know when I go here, there's going to be some good limited series or like ongoing series. But also you got to wait. There's a lot of crap on there, too.
Yeah,
which I guess is true in some way of everybody but Netflix, which seems to be more crap than like high quality original stuff.
Yeah, that's the thing that makes it such a confusing app. And I think it's probably user error on my part, which is to say that when I think of the Max app, I'm coming at it as an HBO fan. So the portal that I'm going to go to on that app is towards the HBO shows and programs and stuff, right?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Yeah.
It's just like, I just don't know who the people are. And I know that they exist and they must exist in pretty great numbers. Like, who's pulling up the Max app because they're like, I need to see like 1,000 episodes of House Hunters. And this is where I'm going to watch it, or like, I don't know, some other Discovery Channel show that's like Home Improvement or whatever. It's like, it just feels like, if I'm going to pull up a streamer, it's to watch some kind of premium product is how I think of the apps. But there are just as many people, I'm sure, who are like, I'm going to veg out and just have, Sell This House running in the background.
Yeah.
And it's just like, okay, it's just really strange.
It's an interesting juxtaposition.
Yeah, those two things are living in the same place, I guess, is what's weird.
Yeah.
That Shark Week and House of Dragons are going to be coming from the same garden hose. It's a little strange.
I'm ready for the mashup. I'm ready for the crossover event to end all events.
Shark Dragons? Let's Sharks?
Go. Last night was a big night for dragons in TV, my friend. It was a big night.
So Max, we're done. Oh, it's time to spin the wheel, and I did not pull up the wheel app here. Hang on. You'll have to bear with me while I get this going.
I'm going to solve. All right. Cornucopia cabinet.
All right, Ryan, I'm putting you back to work again. It has landed on your Amazon Prime Video show. So what would you have suggested as an option? I'm a Virgo.
Oh, I need to finish that. This would be a good excuse to go back to that.
But what would you like to watch for Amazon Prime?
Let's go with that.
Oh, okay. You want to do I'm a Virgo? Okay.
Yeah, I don't know what else. I mean, The Boys we've already talked about.
No, I'm a Virgo sounds good. It was on my list of like things to watch from last year anyway. So
Boots. So yeah, let's stick with that. It's
right.
going to be different to anything that we've talked about so far.
There you go. So next time on PCTV, we'll be talking about I'm a Virgo on Prime Video. Ryan, thanks for taking a trip over to Vietnam with me. Do you think
Glad to do
it? Do you think you and me and like 3 other people are going to be able to topple a communist regime? Do you think that's
I'll try anything once.
All right. We will see you next time.